A rundown nature park full of strange secrets.
Some find it creepy and spooky at night. To me, I love the dark. It doesn't bother me. I'm the boogeyman out here.
Forgotten machines that were so advanced, their technology is still classified.
It was supposed to be top secret. It was supposed to be locked up. It wasn't.
And a towering skyscraper that oversaw the rise and fall of a city.
This building was the heartbeat of Memphis.
Scattered across the United States are abandoned structures and those who know their stories. These forgotten ruins reveal the past of this land and its people. These are the secrets of hidden America. Hidden in the forests of upstate New York lies a pioneering place that connected people with nature, for better or for worse.
Growing up here was kind of desolate, kind of barren. It's wild. It's primitive. And in the end, it's very peaceful.
The Catskills are now this vacation hotspot, but they're also a place shrouded in history and legends.
In the summer months, it's a jungle here, but in the winter, it's freezing cold and frigid. This change in weather over the year just chews up any building that isn't maintained.
This place looks like a tourist attraction that time has forgotten. It's always extra creepy to go to abandoned places where you know that people had lots of fun.
This is my Disney World growing up. And coming down here was like, everything back in the day.
Through the trees, a number of distinct structures stand out.
Peeking out of the forest, there are hints of what this place used to be. There are enclosures, cages, a small amphitheater. Makes me think that it was a zoo of some sort.
But this venue of entertainment harbored a dark secret.
This place must have been shut down for a reason. But why was it preserved like this, kept in a state of suspended abandonment?
Some find it creepy here at night, but walking around at night here is a whole nother experience. A fun experience.
Sean Johnson has been coming here since he was a child. He's now in charge of keeping the memory of this place alive.
I first came here in 1977, me and my two sisters. Totally amazed, blown away. It was something new around every corner. New experience, new smell, new wonder, new animal. Magical.
Covering 1,000 acres, this is the oldest private zoo in America. This is the Catskill Game Farm.
The Catskills have always been a vacation destination for rich New Yorkers. This place began as a hobby in the 1930s for a New York banker named Roland Lindemann.
He filled it with varieties of deer, which he raised to be hunted or sold to other farms.
But the game farm soon drew attention because of its ideal location.
Back in the day, this is a very, very, very popular tourist area. Due to the mountains, the scenery, they bring people up from the city for the summers. They'd be here all summer long.
The increased affordability of automobiles in the 1940s led to a boom in middle-class vacationers coming to the Catskills. Lindemann soon realized he would have an even more lucrative business if he created a petting zoo with the offspring of his game animals.
Children during the post-war baby boom loved the Catskill Game Farm because they could feed baby animals. By 1950, nearly 200,000 visitors were visiting the game farm yearly, and they had almost 1,000 animals which could be seen.
The game farm was officially recognized as a zoological park by the Department of Agriculture in 1958, making Roland Lindemann the first private zoo owner in the nation.
I believe his passion was conservation and restoration to the wild and expanding people's experiences with different species. Some of the real exotic species they had here was the white rhino. That was my favorite animal as a kid. To me, it looked like a dinosaur. The skin color, the horns, the whole nine. To me, that was like a unicorn.
Roland Lindemann was born in Germany and hired a fellow German, George Heck, to be the game farm's zoological director. But Heck's family had a dark history.
George Heck's father, Lutz Heck, was director of the Berlin Zoological Garden. He was also a hunting partner with Hermann Goering, which made him essentially the chief zoological officer for the Nazi Party.
Lutz Heck put his knowledge to good use as the Nazis invaded Poland in September 1939.
At the beginning of the war, Poland fell to the Nazi blitzkrieg in 5 weeks. Lutz Heck would be a key figure in the plundering of Warsaw Zoo, convincing the authorities that he would protect the animals.
Nazis' attitudes toward these rare species was the same as it was towards art. They would loot these animals and send them back to Germany.
But that was not the limit of Hitler's plans for the wild creatures of Europe. He wanted to bring a species back from the dead, with Lutz Heck leading the charge. In upstate New York, the Catskill Game Farm became the largest private zoo in the United States. Yet it had an unexpected Nazi connection through its zoological director. George Heck's father, Lutz, was tasked with undertaking one of Hitler's more unusual plans before World War II.
Lutz Heck was also key to trying to resurrect the European aurochs, a wild ox that had gone extinct and was at one time a symbol of the German people.
The aurochs program was kind of a pet project of Adolf Hitler's. The idea was that he would repopulate the conquered areas of Poland and the Soviet Union with this giant ox that was somehow symbolically representative of the German people, a kind of zoological Lebensraum. But the whole breeding program was a failure.
George Heck inherited a fascination for zoology from his father, but fortunately it led him down a more legitimate path at the Catskill Game Farm. His partnership with Roland Lindemann proved to be a success, as they imported a number of unique, near-extinct species.
At its height, the zoo was attracting nearly 500,000 visitors annually, but by the end of the 20th century, its fortunes were in steep decline.
As with many attractions in the Catskills, the 70s and 80s and the promise of cheap airfare led to a decline of the game farm.
It's easier to fly to the Bahamas than it would become driving 2 hours north to go to a zoo. But you know, the resorts closed down one by one. Everybody's out of work. I mean, to me, it was really bad.
To keep the zoo open, Roland Lindemann continued to rely on the original purpose of the game farm.
Unfortunately, many of these animals were sent to private ranches for canned hunts. A canned hunt is essentially a situation where wealthy high rollers seek out the opportunity to kill game animals who probably were raised in tame environments and set into enclosed areas for these hunters to get their kill easily.
This was the dark side to the park. The animals that were fed by children for years were ultimately sold to hunting ranches when they got too big to be petted.
Although hunting is a very popular national pastime, this particular type, canned hunting, is of questionable legality, and 20 states have laws limiting it or banning it altogether.
But these sales were not enough to save the park, and eventually its assets and animals were auctioned off.
On the day of the auction, people showed up from all over the country to bid on the remaining animals. And amongst them were operators of canned hunts, but also animal rights activists.
Fortunately, there was a coordinated effort on the part of the conservationists to buy as many animals as possible. They were successful, and they even saved 2 white rhinos from canned hunts.
After over 70 years of operation, the Catskill Game Farm closed in 2006. Almost 20 years after its closure, some animals have returned.
They're my babies. Make me happy. Make me feel complete.
Tourism has also returned to these mountains, and the game farm's new owners are in the process of updating some of the buildings.
The old giraffe house has been turned into a hotel, aptly named the Long Neck Inn, for tourists to come and experience some nostalgia.
I wake up every day picturing myself that I'm in a dream, that I'm actually running the Catskill Game Farm. To me, it's a privilege. I love it. Absolutely love it.
Tucked away in central Colorado are the classified remains of a revolutionary government program.
So we're on a nondescript block on the edge of Pueblo. We're near some railroad tracks.
At first, it looks like a storage yard or maybe a parking lot. But then behind the fencing, you notice these vast white objects.
Each one is different, but they are all long airplane-like structures, streamlined, but with no wings.
These vehicles are a version of an American future that never quite came to fruition.
It's like being in one of those 1970s sci-fi movies that tries to show you what the future will look like.
It's not obvious how they work or what they were used for, but what's very clear is that they were extremely powerful.
Printed on the side in bold letters are the words United States Maglev Initiative.
A phone call to a government official revealed that one machine is still a closely guarded state secret.
And he says, "How do you know about that?" I said, "I'm standing looking at it." I sent him a picture, and his first word was,
These machines originally lived at a secretive government testing facility less than 30 miles away.
it's kind of like a little Area 51 out there. You can't drive up to it. They'll get you.
Ron Roach, a former U.S. Navy submariner, knew that acquiring these unique vehicles would be a major coup.
A lot of people in a prior organization here had tried to get these, and they wouldn't let them go. I went out there being military, ex-military myself, and they're all ex-military out there, and we got our heads together.
From 2008, a Pueblo-based foundation officially took ownership of these innovative vehicles. They represent an era when American transport was at a crossroads.
We can point to the 60s as the decade where Americans really fell in love with the car.
The government was deeply concerned about the potential for a countrywide gridlock, and they felt that another mode of transportation was desperately needed.
In 1965, Congress passed the High-Speed Ground Transportation Act. When President Johnson announced the act, he said, "Today, an astronaut can orbit the Earth in less time than it takes for a man to travel on the ground from New York to Washington, D.C."
Other countries, however, were taking impressive strides forward.
At the same time, the Japanese were unveiling their new 130-mile-per-hour bullet train. France, meanwhile, was pushing ahead with their futuristic aerotrain, which was being tested on tracks just outside of Paris.
Built to achieve a normal cruising speed of just over 100 miles an hour, the aerotrain achieved nearly double that speed on test run.
The world was racing ahead at breakneck speed. The U.S. had to catch up, and it had to do it quickly.
Military contractors submitted ambitious plans, and these three vehicles emerged as America's leading candidates. And the world was watching to see if they would change the course of history. On the edge of Pueblo, Colorado's downtown, lie three forgotten machines. They are known as the rocket cars, America's answer to the global transportation technology race. The first prototype to be tested was called the Garrett.
This one was used to see how fast you could run on rail. That's all it was doing, how fast it could run on rail.
They used a 3,000 horsepower turbine from a crashed NASA airplane to give it all the power it needed.
The Garrett set the world speed record for an air-powered wheel-on-rail vehicle at 255 miles per hour. It is still holding this record today.
That must have been exciting and honestly terrifying for the crew that did these experiments.
There's one red button that always tripped us out. It says no, Psalms 23.
It's the stop button. I think the message is, if you try to stop this thing when it's going top speed, you better start praying.
But the Garrett was unfortunately an accident waiting to happen.
The TGV and the bullet train, they tilt. That's what keeps them on the tracks. This one couldn't do that. So there's a big chance this come off the tracks. Oh yeah, I'd hate to see that thing come off the tracks at that speed.
To revolutionize train travel, American engineers decided they were going to have to move away from traditional railroad tracks. In 1972, the Office of High-Speed Ground Transportation began testing a brand new train technology.
The idea of the hover train came from the hovercraft concept. If you could do that over water, why not over tracks?
This is the Grumman. It's called a track levitated research vehicle. It ran in a channel of concrete like this. These big rubber pads here kept it off the sides of the concrete, and the ones on the bottom lifted it up.
So the Grumman got its levitation power from three huge turbofan engines on top. It would suck in air and then expel it underneath.
When they first started to run this thing, they thought it was a bird. Tried to fly, it came about 6 feet up off the ground.
To this day, mystery surrounds this vehicle, and information on it is still classified.
There's so much we don't know about the Grumman. This makes you think, what did they learn in developing it?
The secretive nature of this train makes sense when you realize the resemblance it has to one of the most famous vehicles of all time.
We were told by a man that was in the Smithsonian that they wanted to use this for aerodynamic testing for the space shuttle. It looks just like the shuttle.
But much of its operational history remains a national secret.
To this day, we've been unable to get test results on this thing.
But just before the Department of Transportation pulled the plug on the whole program, one more radical machine was tested, the Roar Aerotrain.
These two big holes here are air intakes. If you were standing over there about 50 feet away and they fired this thing up, it would pull your hat off for you and it'd go through the fans.
It was another hover train, but this one ran on a monorail.
Stepping inside the train really gets the imagination working. It's like stepping into the past and the future at the same time.
I used to enjoy coming up here and just sit down and look at it and just dream what it was to operate this thing.
One thing so distinctive about this train is it didn't have a traditional cockpit for the engineer to look out of. he would rely on the video screens.
In 1975, the government strategy shifted away from high-speed rail, and the whole program was shut down.
The forecast of nationwide gridlock never really materialized, mostly because larger, cheaper airfare became possible across the nation.
By the late 70s, everybody was flying in jets, and the cost was really quite competitive, even with old slow rail. An Amtrak ticket and a plane ticket were often roughly the same price.
This was a pivotal moment in American history, a time when the country could have had a very different future for transport.
Like everything that everybody's dreams, they kind of got shattered and they ended. And this is where the dream sets right now.
Ron proudly remembers the day these unique trains arrived, having taken a long journey from the nearby testing facility.
These are very hard to move. The one that we're sitting in right now was moved on house-moving dollies, and it took them 2.5 hours to go 8 miles. I worked hard on obtaining them, and then to see them finally here, I sat back and just went, oh, they're here. Being one of a kind, that makes them very special.
The rocket cars have now sat dormant for decades, but their former home, the high-security test center, is still in operation.
All that security and secretiveness, it really makes you wonder, what are they doing out there?
Maybe some new, improved rocket cars are just around the corner.
Near the midpoint of the Mississippi River, there's a building that reaches toward the skies. It was built to reflect hope, but came crashing down during a moment of national tragedy.
It's incredible to be up here. There's no words. This building is iconic. Knowing who has been up here, you feel part of history.
We're in Memphis, Tennessee, home of the blues and the birthplace of rock and roll.
Among the bustle of downtown, a derelict 37-story tower dominates the skyline.
This place is huge. It's the tallest building around. You would think it would be bubbling over with excitement and activities, but yet it's derelict.
This building has a very eerie feel to it. It's floor after floor of damaged furniture and papers strewn about. It's as if one day, all of a sudden, everyone just decided to up and leave.
Why in the world has it been abandoned?
Above all the empty floors sits something unexpected.
What is that on the roof? It looks like a UFO has landed right on top of the building.
While the pinnacle was a spot for the city's movers and shakers, the building offered something Memphis had never seen before.
In its heyday, this building was the shining gem of Memphis. The stars came from all over.
This building represents the golden age of both America and capitalism, but was brought down by one of America's darkest days.
This 37-story building is the tallest in Memphis. Leonard James took a job here as a college student.
When I first started working here, I was 24. It was an exciting time then in Memphis, and I was very happy to get the job here. We were the talk of the town.
This tower was designed to cash in on a feel-good factor spreading across the city.
In the 1960s, Memphis was becoming the center of culture and music, and people actually wanted to relocate there.
Local businessman Harry Bloomfield had a dream. He wanted to build a place where all these fine minds, lawyers, architects, engineers, accountants, could work together under one roof and make Memphis a metropolitan titan.
This is 100 North Main. Construction began here on June the 30th, 1963.
Harry Bloomfield had his 13-year-old son break ground here with a gold-plated shovel. We can only imagine that this was a sign of this vision that he had of the building and the city's future.
By the time the building opened in 1965, it was already 50% occupied. Yet the real jewel of 100 North Main wasn't within its walls. It's something lifelong Memphis resident Megan May has seen many times from the streets below.
So this is the pinnacle of this building. This is the revolving restaurant. It would make a full 360-degree rotation every 90 minutes.
I was the head bartender. I liked the atmosphere, going up the escalators and knowing you're going to be at the top of the world in Memphis when you get up there.
This restaurant may have offered unbeatable views, but the staff needed more than just a tolerance for heights.
There were challenges working at the restaurant. The key thing was when you came out the serving door from the kitchen, the floor is moving. So you have to step out like you're ready to jump on a treadmill. You got to be walking or you'll drop everything.
Fortunately, the threat of broken dishes didn't keep the customers away, as this restaurant was part of a craze spreading across America.
In the 1960s, revolving restaurants were the new big thing.
They originated in Germany, but they hit America just 3 years later in 1962 when the Space Needle opened in Seattle.
These sky-high restaurants were designed to reflect the new age.
This was the dawn of the space age, and it wasn't just politicians who were gripped by this new frontier.
Popular culture had really bought into the idea of going into space. And this UFO-shaped restaurant really fed into this mania.
But while space rockets were about to take humans into orbit, for many, this restaurant was the best view they could get of the blue planet.
Everybody that's anybody in Memphis, lawyers, doctors, judges, they all came to the top of the 100th Main building.
Elvis loved this place. I feel like I should be wearing blue suede shoes because I am indeed walking in the footsteps of the king.
Some of the celebrities I saw were ZZ Top, B.B. King. I met Hank Aaron, Linda Carter. Those parties were super wow. Free alcohol all night and great music, great DJs. It was a hoot.
While the restaurant was the talk of the town, the top 4 floors offered something found nowhere else in Memphis.
So this is Top of the 100 Club. This was a very exclusive club, members only. When you think about the deals that were made, I think a lot of them probably happened at this table right here.
However, some of the members in this private club partied too hard, endangering the citizens of Memphis 430 feet below.
This is the Japanese garden, but it closed because people kept throwing small rocks off the top.
Despite the occasional stone plummeting to street level, the top of the 100 Club and 100 North Main boomed. But no one could have predicted that just 3 years after opening, the customers would be sent running.
We became the city that killed the dream.
In Memphis, the city's tallest building was where the movers and shakers partied, until an event that took place just blocks away shook America, changing everything.
On April 4th, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated at the Lorraine Motel. He was in town in support of the sanitation strikes that were happening all around the city.
There were demonstrations and riots across the country, but Memphis was one of the worst hit areas. Almost overnight, the appeal of the city evaporated for many, and this once bustling downtown area became a spot to be avoided.
Downtown Memphis was devastated, and this building, really, it started its slow decline. Over the next decades, the revolving restaurant managed to stay open, but revenue was down. Downtown really wasn't a place that you went.
With the money in short supply, in 2001 the revolving restaurant turned for the final time. Yet the rest of 100 North Main limped on.
Companies continued to leave, and by 2012, the occupancy rate had fallen down to about 30%.
2 years later, the last resident left, and the doors to Memphis's tallest building shut.
Today, over half a century since Dr. King's assassination, this building's shadow is becoming a symbol of optimism once more. It's something the mayor of Memphis, Paul Young, is hoping will springboard new life into the city.
Part of my campaign platform is about remediating blight in our community, and 100 North Main will ensure that that happens. We're going to see this building revitalized.
Paul's team is planning to turn 100 North Main into commercial units, a hotel, and apartments.
The modernization and reopening of such an iconic building will be a tremendous development in Memphis in terms of revitalizing the downtown, but it's also important in terms of American history, given Memphis's critical place in our culture.
Perhaps one day, Memphians will be able to eat their dinner while admiring the same view that Elvis enjoyed over 50 years ago.
There will definitely be a restaurant at the top of 100 North Main. I'm not sure if the floor will revolve, but this building will be the go-to place for Memphians once again.
In the Pacific Northwest, there's a town with a dark secret, where fortunes were made and livelihoods were lost.
When I walk in the underground, I feel a great sense of pride. Even to this day, it puts me in awe.
This was the Wild West's Sodom and Gomorrah.
Near the heart of the city of Pendleton, an abandoned structure hides a twisted past.
This is a two-story brick building. It looks like it was a commercial building at one point.
This place has stuff everywhere, but some of it looks a little X-rated.
Scribbled all over the doors are writings, and one of them says, "The finest breast man has ever seen awaits your touch in room 18.
This place sat right behind our police station. They actually had a plank that went across over to the windows in the back of the police station. They probably were there just to check on those girls and enforce the law, if I were guessing.
Despite the shady deeds that undoubtedly occurred within these walls, it's what's beneath that's truly shocking.
Below ground, things get even darker and crazier. When you go into the basement, there's all these tunnels.
This is absolutely mind-blowing. These tunnels seem spread like a labyrinth. Who built them here?
If you were to walk back in these tunnels in the 20th century, you would go through all different sensations and smells, from tobacco to alcohol to dirty sheep herders to opium.
It was a wild and woolly place. They gambled, they drank whiskey, drank beer, and chased girls.
Beneath the streets of Pendleton, Oregon, there's a labyrinth with a secret, sordid past. It's something that Phil Garton first heard about as a boy.
I first started hearing about the tunnels the time I was 8 or 9 years old. There were stories of Pendleton having a dark underbelly.
30 years later, Phil and a group of friends decided to investigate these rumors. They began unearthing the tunnels once more.
When I first entered the tunnels, they'd become full of rubble and junk, and it was so dark down there, and it was almost eerie. I felt a bit like Indiana Jones.
Phil and his friends uncovered a lost world which hadn't been witnessed for decades. This is the Pendleton Underground.
The true extent of the underground has been lost to time. Today, it's believed that the tunnels stretched 4 blocks north to south and 2 blocks east to west, maybe even further.
These tunnels were originally put in here as freight delivery systems to the basements of the businesses in Pendleton. It was considered unfashionable in the Old West to take your merchandise in the same door that your customers went in.
But soon, events above ground would make these tunnels and rooms far more than just basements for storage.
Around the turn of the 20th century, this area was a party town. Downtown, there were 18 brothels and 32 bars, all within 4 blocks.
You had sheep herders, cowboys, the ranchers that have been up in the mountains for a long period of time, and they need to let loose and have a little fun. So, where better to go than Pendleton?
While many people enjoyed the fun offered here, a set of unwritten laws meant others faced persecution and even death. Pendleton, Oregon was the party town of the Wild West, but not everyone was invited.
In the early 20th century, there were a lot of people of Chinese heritage in the northwest of America. Many of their ancestors had come over during the gold rush or to work on the railroads.
This work put them in direct conflict with white Americans who felt that they were stealing their jobs. And Pendleton drew a lot of shady, fighting and drinking characters who often directed their aggression towards the Chinese immigrants.
Here in Pendleton, there were sundowners laws, unwritten laws, so that if the Chinese were above ground after sundown, they could be shot and killed. And the man who shot him may have just been fined $5 for discharging his firearm within city limits, not for actually killing the person.
With the threat of beatings and death above ground, some of the Chinese immigrants turned to the tunnels and basements beneath for sanctuary.
According to local legend, many Chinese found safety underneath the city, and they expanded the tunnels by knocking down the walls. There are even rumors that some Chinese people lived down there.
The Chinese used the underground in Pendleton like you would use your house with hallways, and they moved about rather freely underground.
There were businesses in the Pendleton underground. Some of them were just extensions of businesses above ground, but there were also some businesses that were probably solely underground. And one of these was a laundry, which was owned by a Chinese immigrant.
Yet the clandestine nature of the underground attracted some businesses with a more nefarious purpose.
This is one of the opium dens in here. And this was not only used by the Chinese. You would have had working girls and cowboys come down and smoke opium. As you can see, they've got the wood pillows on the bed where they would lay on their sides to smoke the opium.
For around a decade, this unlikely underground world flourished. However, a radical wave of change spreading across America would turn this place upside down.
In 1908, Pendleton and the county of Umatilla went dry. They enacted prohibition.
This was 12 years before Congress enacted nationwide prohibition. But in the decades leading up to it, many places in America, including Pendleton, had already enacted their own alcohol bans.
The new law forced some of the bars in Pendleton to head underground.
Prohibition made the Pendleton Underground come alive. Suddenly, it was the place to be, and people who normally would have never ventured underground were going there regularly to have a drink and have some fun.
There were card rooms in the underground and a bunch of bars down there. There was everything from beer to moonshine whiskey. I think these tunnel walls would have seen some great parties.
But the good times down below wouldn't last. On the 5th of December 1933, Prohibition came to an end and brought with it the decline of the Pendleton Underground.
The end of Prohibition played a big role in the folding of the underground because there was really no good reason to hide underground. You could actually go out and have a brewski about any place you wanted to.
Attitudes towards Chinese immigrants slowly changed after World War I, and so they were able to live more openly and not have to be in hiding.
We don't know exactly when the underground shut, but people did stop coming down here, and slowly but surely, the tunnels were blocked up.
The only time you would hear about the Pendleton Underground was maybe from an old drunk at a local bar.
Despite almost being lost to time, the Pendleton Underground has made a comeback. Brooke Armstrong is the director of the project.
Today, the Pendleton Underground is used to give tours throughout all the tunnels and to share Pendleton's history.
While people visit from across the globe, perhaps the Pendleton Underground's biggest campaigner lives far closer to home.
Oh, it's very special. It's like our legacy because we worked so hard putting it together. I will continue to advocate for the Pendleton Underground as long as I live.